Our audience today is persons living with dementia, people who are caring for someone with dementia and a care partner in some way, people who want to learn more, health professionals. There's all kinds of great resources that we're going to learn today about making the most of a video call during virtual visits. And so we recognize we have all kinds of people that are joining us today. A reminder too that this session is being recorded, so your microphones and cameras have been turned off, just so we can have privacy protected for everyone. Today's presentation is about 45 minutes long, and we are happy to say this wonderful presentation was provided to us through the Alzheimer's Society of British Columbia, and so their permission was given to us to share this wonderful information. So please sit back and enjoy, and we'll be back with you at about the 45-minute mark so we can answer any questions that may have come up.
Welcome to Virtual Visits, Making the Most of Video Calling. This session is for people living with dementia and care partners supporting a person living with dementia, whether that be someone who is social distancing at home in the community or living in long-term care. You may find, however, that the tips shared here today are applicable to you even if you aren't living with or caring for someone living with dementia. We have a full agenda today, so I'll just quickly give you an overview of what we will be discussing. So we'll start off with some basics of video calling and how to create an optimal environment for those calls. We'll talk about how you can use video calling to assess health and safety needs in the home for the person you're calling, and also how to increase success when calling someone. We're going to provide examples of social activities that you can try in a video call. And then we'll also talk about some ways that you can use to end a call without having to say those words goodbye. And lastly, we'll talk about what you can do if the call simply just does not go well, despite your best efforts. It's common knowledge that humans are very social creatures. Our brains are actually wired for socializing. When COVID-19 first reared its ugly head, some of us may have secretly celebrated having a genuine government-directed excuse to stay home and social distance, especially those amongst us who would consider themselves introverts. Well, fast forward, and we are now over 2 months into this new way of life, and many of us are experiencing the stress and the negative impact on our health and well-being that the social distance is causing. Realizing the extreme importance of staying connected has certainly caused people to become very creative and take time and make effort to stay connected to family and friends. And by attending this webinar, this is just one way you are making the effort. Video calling software can play a valuable role in connecting you to your family at a time when staying connected is so important. Fortunately for us in this day and age, there are many ways to stay connected to those who live outside of our home through virtual visits. That is a visit that happens either through the telephone or online using one of the many video calling platforms that are available to us. These are Skype, FaceTime, Facebook Messenger, Zoom, Google Duo, Hangouts, WhatsApp, etc. Now, FaceTime is the Apple term for video calling that is used on iPhones, iPads, and Mac computers. So if both parties on the call have Apple products that they're using, you may simply FaceTime one another. If one of the parties, though, on the call has an Android or Windows device, you would then need to use a different app, such as one of those that we've just mentioned. Best thing to do is to experiment what works best for you and the person that you are calling. It is important to note that our focus today, though, is not to review these apps and platforms or to talk about which one is best. That we're going to leave up to you to decide, and it will be based on your own comfort levels and needs. Rather, what we really want to focus on today is how to set up your environment to make these video calls successful when you are calling somebody, and particularly those living with dementia. And we will also talk about how you can enrich your calls to make them more meaningful and engaging. As we talk about virtual visits today, I'd like you to keep in mind that we all have our own comfort level in learning new apps or new software. For some of us, this comes very naturally, and we could even be doing it as a hobby or a fun pastime. However, for others, this may be a whole new world for you, and it can feel very overwhelming, actually, or stressful, not knowing where to start or what to do. So just remember, you're not alone in your exploration, and there is definitely support out there. And we'll talk more about that a little later in the session. At this time, I'd just like to say a very big thank you to all the caregivers and people living with dementia who took the time to share their experiences with us for the development of this session. Very grateful to them for their time. Take a moment to think how COVID-19 has changed so much of what we would classify as our regular life. Not only are we relying on virtual connections to socialize with family and friends, we are also using it now for other tasks such as shopping, banking, entertainment, and even accessing healthcare. We want to make sure that just as we have made use of these options to continue the best we can with some form of normal life, it's important that people living with dementia have those same opportunities to engage with others, to take part in special occasions, and just to feel that they too are socially connected. So of course, to access video calling, we need to have access to a device that supports video calls, such as a smartphone, computer, or tablet. If the person you want to call does not have one of these devices and they're interested in trying it before buying it, you could consider if there are any available alternatives in your communities. We hear that some care homes have tablets to be loaned out to their residents. There are businesses in some communities that are offering private iPad or tablet rentals. Some community organizations are collecting donated tech devices and delivering these to seniors. And an example of that is the District of West Vancouver that just recently, at the beginning of April, launched a project to collect donated tablets for seniors in order to keep them connected during this time. For other options, I recommend calling 211, and they'll be able to give you more information on what may be available in your own specific community. So now, while access is one side of the coin, the other is the support needed for using the device and making a video call. If you're unfamiliar or uncomfortable with new technology, think about who in your life you could call on for some help setting something up. Maybe a really tech-savvy teenage grandchild. Most platforms are simple to use once you've figured out how to install the app. Many people, whether they are living with dementia or not, find learning how to use a new device or app challenging. But when you consider the changes that occur in the brain of a person living with dementia, especially those changes to visual processing and language, you can just imagine and appreciate how this challenge becomes even greater. Many families we have spoken with have found it helpful to have that support person available to help the person with dementia to connect to the call, or even better, to stay with them, to help them participate in a call in a way that is meaningful to them. This could be a recreation therapist if the person is living in long-term care, or home care if the person is living in the community. Recommend that you contact your case manager or care home to find out who might be available to help your family member participate in a video call. We're going to start with some tips for increasing the success of your video calls from a technological perspective. So understanding how your physical environment affects your calls is important for understanding what can make it easier or more challenging for someone living with dementia to participate. I'd highly recommend you don't just jump into a session, especially if this is something new to you, without first doing a test. Enlist a family member or friend and spend just even 5 minutes testing to ensure all systems are working smoothly. So lighting. Take a moment to check your lighting before calling. Lighting can make a huge difference to the success of your call. Natural light is great, but it can obviously fluctuate throughout the day, and what you need is a light source that is consistent. So when taking advantage of the natural and direct light, it works best when positioned in front of you or behind the camera, rather than directly on or behind you. Poor lighting can create shadows, and this can make it challenging for the person you're calling to see you properly, and certainly can increase confusion for someone living with dementia whose brain may not be able to differentiate your shadowy silhouette as the person that is talking. Now, when we ask people living with dementia and their care partners what made video calling more successful for them, a high-definition camera came highly recommended. One person noted that it felt like you are sitting in the same room. With audio, you want to test your mic before you call to ensure that it works and that your speakers are set at an appropriate volume. Look at where your microphone is positioned. If it's too close to your mouth, your voice may be too muffled or pick up each breath. But if it's too far away, it may be hard for the other person to make out what you're saying. If using the microphone on your computer, try to locate where the microphone is exactly on your computer, just so that you can ensure nothing is blocking it and it's best positioned to pick up your voice. I would definitely recommend using a headphone with microphone built in if this is something that is available to you. We find with using these headphones, it helps to reduce the presence of feedback on a call. And doing your best to limit background noise also helps call quality, such as turning off the television. You want to position yourself appropriately. Try to position the camera facing you at eye level or just slightly above so that your full face is included in the video. However, try to keep proper distance from the camera. You don't want to be sitting too close so that your face fills the whole screen. What you can aim for is when you picture a headshot of a photograph of yourself or of somebody, that's what you're looking for is head and shoulders that are in view. A good way to look at it as well is an eye-to-eye video call is generally the most comfortable for people. Limit distractions. You want to keep your background simple. So whenever possible, try to reduce any clutter or distracting items behind you. For a person living with dementia, their brain has a greater difficulty filtering out irrelevant visual stimuli, such as a messy bookshelf or an abstract, busy painting. You also want to avoid moving the camera to show someone something around you, as this can be very disorientating. If you'd like to show something to the person you're calling, instead bring the item to the camera instead of the other way around. Also try to limit your own excess movement. Moving around a lot or fidgeting can be distracting in a video call. If you have a pet that can be distracting, also consider removing them from the room during the call. However, and this is an important point, you may know though that their presence will enhance the enjoyment of the call for the other person. They could really love animals, or they even may have a connection with your pet. Limit competing demands on your computer and connection. We've heard a lot from caregivers that camera freezing or lagging is one of the biggest challenges they face on video calls. As it is, there exists a slight delay between the sound and video in a call. Sometimes this is so subtle that we don't even notice it, but our brains do. So this delay will vary by internet speed and which device you're using. but it is always a good idea to try to limit the demands on your internet connection and your device. Close any apps that may compete with your video calling software to improve your connection speed. Also try sitting closer to your Wi-Fi modem to improve connections. If bandwidth is an issue and video is just not working that day, turn off your video and use audio only. Having voice only is certainly much better than a very frustrating, choppy video. So what is the purpose of the call? You want to consider what the needs of the person you're calling are and the purpose of the call. Is this call purely for social reasons, or are there other needs that can be met with a video call? What are their needs now, and what is likely to happen in the future? So again, do you have a specific goal in mind that you want to accomplish in this call? Identifying the purpose of the call is a great first step to ensuring that you're prepared for the call and get the most out of your virtual visits. Are you calling because you have health concerns about your person? Or are you concerned over their living environment? If you're calling a person living with dementia who is living alone, you may choose to use video calls as a way of assessing their current living environment. So depending on where the person's capabilities are at, they may be able to show you the state of their home, the inside of their refrigerator, or even that funny sound that their washing machine is making. If you're concerned about your family members' eating habits, try having a virtual lunch with them, but remember to keep it simple. A person's ability to participate in these types of activities certainly can vary greatly depending on what part of their brain has been affected by dementia. Video calling may also help provide a glimpse into your family members' hygiene and any safety issues within the home. So for example, if you notice that the person you're calling appears disheveled, or you spot piles of paper around their chair, and this is unlike them, the situation wouldn't be like this in the past, you may want to probe further to assess for any additional changes. So if assessment is the purpose of your call, keep a critical eye out to look around the room, especially behind the person, to see if there are any situations that may pose a threat to safety or things that need to get fixed. Do you notice any visible bruises that could suggest a recent fall, or burns that may be a sign of them having safety issues in the kitchen? How you approach the issue you notice depends on the person's awareness of the changes and ability to talk about what it is that you're noticing. Unfortunately, sometimes changes in the brain can make awareness difficult, and it may not be effective to discuss the changes you are seeing if the person has no insight into their situation and disease. And in actual fact, this could be a sure way to end the call abruptly, or to create anxiety and stress for the person. And that certainly is not the intent of your call. So keep in mind that your ability to assess the person's health and safety over video, though, is dependent on their ability to answer that call in the first place. So for some, using video calls may not have been familiar even before the onset of dementia. And maybe for those who have used it a little bit in the past by themselves, because of the progression of the disease, it'll eventually become too challenging for them to continue. However, under different circumstances in the future, you may be able to try again. And we have a great example from one care partner who kindly shared with us that while it was simply too challenging for her to video call her mom when she lived alone in the community, once her mom moved into assisted living, she was then able to leverage the support of the staff there to have a successful call with her mom. And so what they would do is they would help to position the camera appropriately, they'd orient her mom to where the voice was coming from, and she was able to have a great connection with her mom. So for many of us, when we think about virtual visits, we automatically think about social calls. the ones where you call to check in on someone, to see how their day was, or to update them on something going on in your life, or even in the news. With restrictions still in place for most in-person activities, using video calling for entertainment or a way to pass the time has become increasingly common. So activities that you may have traditionally done as a family or with a friend in person is now moving online. And so think about some activities that you have tried in a video call before, and if those have worked. One great example that was shared to us by a family was that for one of their birthdays, they cut a big birthday cake into 3 pieces and delivered a piece in advance to the house of each family who was joining them in their virtual birthday celebration. So together in a video call, they were able to watch the birthday girl open her gift and then even light a candle on their piece of the birthday cake and sing happy birthday to her. And this is a great example of getting creative to stay connected and celebrate a family event virtually while still staying safe. So we're going to talk about planning for successful virtual visits. COVID-19 has provided many of us with much more free time, possibly too much. Extended periods of not feeling stimulated or feeling bored can cause people to feel restless and certainly have a negative effect on our well-being. Incorporating activities into our video call doesn't have to be complicated. When you think about the activities you have tried in a video call, consider what may have made those virtual visits successful or what was challenging. Another idea is to think of activities that you would normally do if you were to visit in person and then bring those into the call with you. You want to consider personality and preferences. So what is the comfort level of the person you're calling? Are they open to and have been participating in a video call with you in the past? Did they do that? And would they now be open to trying a new activity using video calling? Your knowledge of the person's personality and general preference for activities can help to gauge what the person would find meaningful. So suggest an activity that you both will enjoy. Activities often become more meaningful when they're done together, even at a distance. Important factor here is to focus on the remaining skills and match the activity to the person's abilities. The question we would normally ask a person on a call, such as, how was your day and did you eat lunch? What did you get up to on the weekend? These are all questions that draw from our short-term memory bank. During our calls, we want to access the long-term memory as much as possible. So important because this is the place of comfort and confidence for most people living with dementia. And this is how we can help them to feel successful. And then consider the person's routine before COVID-19. What activities did the person enjoy before? And consider how these activities could possibly be adapted or supported in a video call. Structure and routine is immensely helpful for helping to orient a person living with dementia. And now having to stay at home and not being able to participate in regularly scheduled activities has created a disruption in their routine and left hole in many people's daily schedules. So think about how you can use video calling to bring some of those benefits back to the person. An example is if you used to have coffee with the guys at Tim Hortons every Friday morning, explore options for connecting with one or all of them via the phone or online meeting platform. We're all experiencing an incredible amount of change, and change can be very hard, particularly for people living with dementia. Our ability to successfully manage change, however, will depend on how we adapt. Many people feel helpless or frustrated when they're unable to do the activities they used to do in the way that they used to do them. And this is certainly amplified if trying to do the activity again means needing to learn new technology and one that you are unfamiliar with. And so for many of us, we are just doing our best to try to stay connected with family or friends that are living with dementia. And so this is a situation we find ourselves in. I want to encourage you to be patient with yourself and to be kind to yourself. Whether you're more comfortable with using technology and you're prepared to attempt a virtual family reunion, or just prepared to have some fun one-to-one, having a little dance party with the person that you're going to do the video call with, or possibly you may even decide that it's going to be a phone call, and that is how you're going to connect with the person. Just remember, it is all a connection and it all matters. Exploring ways to have those meaningful connections can sometimes bring frustration, for sure. There's no doubt about that. But what I want you to remember, and I want to encourage you with, is that when we are successful, they can bring a positive feeling that lingers with the person long after the call ends. So some examples of activities you can try in a video call we're going to go through now. Music. Oh, music touches every part of the brain and can be a particularly meaningful way of connecting with someone, whether you are in person or at a distance. One of the challenges we have heard from families calling someone who is more progressed in their dementia is that sometimes it's confusing and disorientating when the person is hearing this voice and not understanding where it's coming from, or why the picture of their family member is moving, or not understanding that the person who's speaking is not present in the room. So if you're experiencing that and finding that a conversation through video calling is too upsetting, try playing the person's favorite song for them. We need to remember that we don't need to talk to have a meaningful connection. Dancing is a wonderful activity. It's just a great way to just be silly, to laugh together, to have a wonderful time of meaningful connection. Color or building Lego together. These are things grandparents often would do with young grandchildren, and they can actually continue to do this through a virtual call. Share your skills. Teaching something to someone else is a great way to boost self-esteem and have fun. Ask your family member to show you how to do something you know they can still do well and enjoy, such as playing the harmonica or to properly wax a car. A lot of us could get some tips on that. I had one family member that said they were speaking to their dad, who is living with dementia, and he was an avid gardener, and so she took to the camera this very sad looking tomato plant and asked him for some tips. And as soon as he saw the tomato plant, he lit up and started to give her lots of great gardening tips. And that produced a very wonderful video call. Cook or complete a do-it-yourself project together. This will depend obviously on the ability levels of actually both parties on the call. You could pick a recipe or project such as painting a picture or a planter that you can both do together while you talk about your day. Playing games together. I can think of an incredible woman I know who was diagnosed with mixed dementia, and while she had trouble navigating her way to and from the local mall, she could beat anyone and everyone at crib years after her diagnosis. So think of a game that you know the person you're calling enjoys and try playing it over a video call. There are games such as charades or I Spy that could be appropriate. If you're looking to skip the video and enrich a phone call, you could try name the tune or hum that tune kind of trivia. And then you could actually use facts that are based on their long-term memory, so music that they enjoyed from their younger years. Keep in mind that these sorts of calls and games will likely have more success if you can guarantee a support person is available to assist either or both of you. Reminiscing can be a powerful tool to create meaningful activities for people living with dementia. This is a great activity for people who are experiencing problems with their short-term memory, as they can remember the past and often in such incredible detail, and they often enjoy sharing stories of their experiences with others. I'm going to put up a quote on the next slide there, and I will read it to you. It does not matter how many times I've heard the story when it brings her so much pleasure to tell it. I know what she will say, I know what happens next, but I cannot take away her pleasure of telling me all over again today. So some examples of topics that you can talk about to encourage reminiscing include their first job, first car, or favorite subject in school as a kid. This is where you use your knowledge of the person to start the conversation, and then you allow them to take it where they choose. Remember that whichever virtual activities you choose, you want to try and focus on the remaining skills. You want to adapt the activity to their abilities, and you want to keep an open mind. So preparing for the call. When preparing for the call, you want to start by setting the stage. Make it as easy for the other person as possible. Some apps have features that allow you to start up audio and or video automatically when receiving a call. If the person you're calling is unfamiliar or unable to set this up and it would help them, see if there's someone else in their household or care home who can assist them. You may need to call ahead to provide direction on how to do this. One thing I want you to bear in mind is when you're calling a person who lives in long-term care, we just don't know how and what their mood was prior to that call. We don't know how their day has been, or even how the call that they're going to now take was explained to them, all of which can make a great difference in how we are received. So when the person with dementia is at home with a care partner, there certainly is more control over when, where, and how the call happens. And we can introduce the activity in a thoughtful, considered way. Choose a time of day when the person living with dementia is at their best. And so you want to make sure that the person is going to be at their best to enjoy this connection opportunity. And for most people, it usually is not a good time too early in the morning or during late afternoon, because that's when their energy levels are typically at their lowest. Keep in mind that while most people tend to have times of day that work best for them, there is never an absolute, because we all, no matter if we have dementia or not, have off days. So if at the beginning of the call you sort of get that sense that's no longer a good time, you need to be prepared to try again later. Create familiarity where you can. So important. You want to, because that familiarity is what increases comfort and eases anxiety. So especially if video calling is new to you or the person with dementia, it absolutely will be unfamiliar at first. And so you want to consider how you can increase the familiarity in other ways. So you could think about their favorite song and start singing that on the call. They could sing that with you. You could have a comforting memory you share from the past where both of you were a part of that event. Start small. If you're the person you're calling is unfamiliar with the technology, try a one-to-one call first, rather than trying to be ambitious and have a large family video conference. If setting up a live video call is just not working or is too unfamiliar and confusing to the person, what we've heard some people have tried to do and has been very successful is they've recorded a video message and sent it to the person. So something that's just very reassuring, short, that can be played when the time is best for the person receiving the message, such as a reminder of how much you love the person. It can be played before the person goes to bed at night, especially if the person has trouble falling asleep. You want to keep a routine. Try as much as possible to phone or to do the video call at the same time every day if possible. Consistency helps people living with dementia know what to expect in their day, and that certainly goes a long way in helping them to reduce any anxiety they may have over surprises that come along. And start simple. One of the common pieces of feedback we heard from people living with dementia is their preference for one-to-one calls. While some people were comfortable with having multiple family members on a video call, most found it to be an added challenge in differentiating who was speaking. There are apps where the picture of the speaker lights up or is highlighted when talking, where you can change the size of how call attendees are displayed. I know, thinking of one there, which is Zoom, and many people do prefer using that. So during the call, try your best to speak slowly and clearly. You also want to set a time limit for the call. Processing all of the stimuli of a video call is exhausting. And so you can imagine how much more exhausting it is for a person living with dementia whose brain is constantly having to work overtime every day. If long calls are challenging, try shorter but more frequent calls to maintain that connection. Sometimes a short positive call can create good feelings that last long after the call ends. If you're having challenges getting your video to work or the person receiving the call appears frustrated, turn off the video and have a simple phone call. You can try the video again another day. Try to talk about something that the other person can also talk about with some confidence. Recently, I got to speak to a gentleman who's living with dementia, and I knew that he was a national volleyball player in his younger years, and so I started asking him about the sport of volleyball and about the rules and the positions, and he just lit up and just carried that conversation, and it was a very meaningful connection. Bring a good news gift to the call. Is there something positive that has happened to you or someone close to you or to the person that you can share? Positive news stories. People love to hear about weddings or babies being born, or anything that would just be something that that person would be able to connect with. Use the call to reassure the person how much you care for them. The greatest benefit of video calling is the ability to share a smile with the person. So even if the words are not fully understood, a smile knows no boundaries. It goes a long way in offering reassurance of love and support and that you're not alone. And talk about something that is meaningful to the person you're calling. Remember that conversation requires short-term memory that will likely be frustrating. So questions that you want to try and avoid are, how are you? And we've mentioned these before. Did you eat breakfast today? What have you been doing today? This certainly can frustrate the brain. What you want to do is share stories that can lead to conversation with the other person. For example, today I enjoyed sitting in the garden and watching the hummingbirds. Or today I decided to cook a turkey for Easter. If you know the person loves something, for instance, tennis, talk about the new tennis racket you just bought. Just opportunities to bring that person into the conversation. Be flexible with call frequency. We all adjust to situations differently, and for some, daily calls are a helpful way of staying connected, while for others, it may be a painful reminder of where they are or what their situation is. You want to pay attention to how the person is doing on the call, and if there are other people around them when the call ends, it's a good idea to check in with them. So maybe there's a family member or a care aide. Follow up with them to see what the emotional state of that person you're calling is like when your call ends. Do they appear uplifted by the call or saddened? It can take time to find the frequency that works best for you and your family member. Remember that there will be days for all of us where it is simply not a good time, either for you or them, and that's okay. So you want to be present. Do your best to be fully present on the call. Look directly into the camera when speaking to the person, because that feels like you're talking to them and are truly engaged in the conversation. You know, you may have heard the stories many times before that they're sharing, but it certainly is something that usually brings the person joy, and that's why they're repeating these stories. And or it may alleviate anxiety because they get to share it with you. So just give them your undivided attention. Video also allows for you to observe the nonverbal piece of communication, which is important in making a connection. Use this opportunity to find out more about how the person is really feeling. Provide comfort and reassurance to the person so that they can leave the call feeling good. You or the person you're calling may not remember the exact content of the call, but the emotions will. I'm going to read a quote that's up on the slide now by Maya Angelou that's very relevant to our webinar. I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. Consider the needs of the person you're calling and how this fits with the software you choose to call them on. For people with hearing loss, for example, talking on the phone can be much more challenging than in real life or in a video call because of the lack of nonverbal cue to what the person is saying. Those cues are the likes of body language, gestures, facial expressions, and pronounced mouth movements when we enunciate. So using video in a call may increase your success with calling the person because you're now bringing the nonverbal pieces of communications back into the conversation. Some apps even offer a subtitle feature at an added cost. Keep in mind that the call may not always be successful. It's okay to experiment and try it. Things change. It takes time to figure out the best frequency of calls, as we've mentioned before, and what technology to use. So the time of day, there's just so many factors. Sometimes a phone call is more successful. We may know that facial recognition can be a problem for people with dementia, but voice recognition can be more reliable. If a video call is too complicated and the person's having trouble hearing on the phone, you could write a letter or send a card. And then think of what else could bring a smile to the person that doesn't involve technology, like sending a care package or flowers. So ways to end a call. How we end our calls have great potential for continuing or changing the tone of the call long after it ends. Particularly with the current physical distancing restrictions of COVID-19, you may find that saying the word goodbye can be a reminder that when the call ends, you're not going to be there, leaving the person sad or lonely. So the longer the person has been self-isolating or living in care, the harder it can be when the call ends. So where possible, try to avoid saying goodbye when ending a call, and instead choose language that is positive. So you want to remind the person how much you enjoyed their company and appreciated their time, and that you will give them, that you'll call them again. And some of the examples of ways that you could try to end the call could be, talking to you is the best part of my day. I can't wait to talk to you again. I'm going to call back tomorrow. See you soon. Oh dear, I need to cook dinner now. I better go. Let's talk about managing the emotion in a call. Think about how you can prepare yourself for possible emotions that you may experience during a call, and in particular if you haven't seen the person in some time. Do you want to share those emotions with the person? Use your knowledge now of that person to guide your response. Dementia impacts a person's ability to regulate their emotions. And if the person you're calling is already having trouble regulating their emotions, you may prefer to hold onto your grief until the call ends. grief is very natural and normal. You need to give yourself permission to name it and feel it. And you'll find when you do that, it just helps it to move through you and allows you to cope better. For many people affected by dementia, those living with dementia and their care partners, guilt and frustration are emotions that are simply a part of the dementia journey. You may think and feel that what you're doing just isn't good enough. Perhaps you're feeling powerless because things are happening and you're not able to just step in and support your family member when they need it. And you're left with that feeling of being torn between you want to be there for the person, but you also want them to be safe. I'm sure many of you listening to this webinar have experienced those feelings and continue to experience them. It may be difficult, but try your best to monitor your tone and use positive language when communicating about COVID-19. You may say something like, I know this feels a little strange, but it sounds like we're getting closer to seeing each other again in person. Or, how wonderful that we can see each other in this way. Remember that it's hard to adapt to the changes to daily life as a result of COVID-19, and acceptance doesn't just come overnight. However, the fact that you actually have joined us today to learn more about how to enhance your virtual visits with your family tells me that you quite likely have come to some level of acceptance about the situation. And this acceptance is where your power lies. You know, we can't change the restrictions around physical distancing or the policies that have been put in place for visiting someone in long-term care, but we can learn how to adapt the way we visit. Recognize that you're doing the best that you can in light of impossible circumstances. It will take some time to adjust and to figure out new routines and activities. Take a moment to think about the changes that you've made and the new things that you have done over these last 2 or 3 months. I'm sure that there is something new that you've tried that you thought you could never do. And when you're thinking about that, I want you to feel good about that accomplishment. The important thing is you need to be kind to yourself at this time. So whichever app or program you choose to use to host your video calls, I want to reassure you that there are no shortage of guides out there with step-by-step instructions on how to use them. We will put a couple of links up at the end of the presentation, and that will provide tech guides for some of the more popular platforms such as Zoom, Skype, and FaceTime.
Hi, folks. So that's the end of the video. We do have a couple of questions that have come through from the audience. And there she is. I'm going to ask Catherine. And between the two of us, we will be able to answer the questions that have come through. So the first one, Catherine, is why should I use video instead of other ways to communicate?
Yeah, so as we heard in the video, it's a great way to be able to allow people to see your face, right? If you have someone that has a hearing issue, being able to see your face, see some of that nonverbal, it's really good. It's a great way for people to feel connected again, and a great way for people to see their family, right? We all know family and friends are so important to us, and allowing us to see faces of people that we know and love allows us to stay connected and to grow that, right? So you don't feel as if you're so alone.
What about rural areas that don't have a really good connection? Halifax area is not too bad. You know, some other areas around here in Nova Scotia have pretty spotty internet. What do you suggest for that?
And so that is a difficult question, because that's the truth, right? We do need internet to be able to connect. Excuse me. And when your internet is uncertain at the best of times, sometimes connecting can be more difficult. What I always say to people is, if you're able to connect, the first thing I always share is, I'm not sure how my internet will go. So if our call drops or if I disappear suddenly, don't worry, I'll call you back. And so it's a great way to start the conversation, to say, I'm so happy I got a minute to see your face, but if anything happens and my internet, starts acting funny on me, I'll call you back. And so that's a great way to kind of start the conversation, so that people know right off there's nothing wrong. They haven't done anything wrong.
It's not their fault.
It's not their fault.
Yeah.
It's just the way of the world, unfortunately. Sometimes in our rural communities, wind can affect it, snow can affect it, weather of all kinds can affect our internet connection. And so as I do when I'm going anywhere, if I'm doing anything and I'm connecting, I always say, if I lose you, I'll call you back. And so that way people don't feel left.
Yeah. And you might have to play around a bit to find a platform that works well for you.
Yeah.
Zoom may use less bandwidth to get into all the words that they use with technology. But you might find that because you both have Apple products, that the FaceTime works well. Or if you both have Facebook, that the Facebook Messenger app works for you guys. So play around a little bit. Don't hesitate to try a few different things and see what works for you guys, whether it's your internet or just comfort in using particular products and devices too.
Absolutely. And I always say to people, don't be afraid of it. I know when you're not super tech smart or tech savvy or used to the technology, people are hesitant. But what I say is, don't worry, right? You can click and click and click, and the worst that you have to do is shut it down and start it over again.
Yeah.
Yeah. So don't ever worry about that.
Yeah.
It was a fantastic presentation filled with so much information.
Oh, super thorough. We could not have done a better job, which is why we chose to do the video, just show their video, because they did such an amazing job. So many great tips. And
so thanks to the Alzheimer's Society in BC for permission to use that. You'll also notice on your screen right now, Beth and I have put up the Alzheimer's Society of Nova Scotia and our information. So if you're looking for how you would call us to connect with us, that information is there. And so that's our info line. If you need to talk, or if you want to talk out anything with us, if you have any questions or concerns, you can certainly call that number. You'll get a person or a voicemail depending on what time it is, and you can leave a message there, and we'll be happy to get back in touch with you. We also have a great website, and that website address is there as well. All of our presentations that we've done have been video recorded, and so we are posting them, and you'll be able to have access to them at a later date. So if you've watched this and you think this would be really great for my kids to see, or for my mom and dad to see, it will be available at a later date. So don't hesitate to hop on and take advantage of that as well. You're also going to see a poll question come up on your screen. So if you take a minute and answer that, that would be fantastic. And that just helps us move forward, do better, know better. And so that would be great. And so I want to say thank you, everybody, for joining us today. As I said before, if you want that confidential call, don't hesitate and reach out to us. And if you want to watch this video again, it has been recorded, so it will be hosted, and you'll be able to find that through our website and through our Alzheimer's Society YouTube channel. So you can watch it, use it as a teaching tool, however best works for you. So thank you, everyone, for joining us today. As always, we're going to be here for a few minutes, so if you have any questions, you can throw a few through into the chat box, and we can answer those privately. So be well, everyone,